All right, so now that we know what a catalog pane is, now that we know that ArcGIS Pro is project based and it's made up of tabs and ribbons and all sorts of fun things, and we've probably insulted a few Esri diehard fans by calling ArcGIS Pro very Microsoft-esque in its appearance. Um, we now have to worry about, okay, well, if I have a map, cool enough, but how do I add data to it? And really, there's two main ways you can add data sets in ArcGIS Pro. The first of which is cloud-based, and we have a few different options, right? We have, maybe you have some content in ArcGIS Online that you'd like to pull in, or maybe your organization has a portal, right, that you can pull data into, or maybe you want to make use of Esri's Living Atlas. But these are all cloud-based, for the most part, cloud-based workflows that you can follow to add data to your project. The second way is, of course, local files, right? So if you receive a file geodatabase, if you receive a shapefile, a CSV, a DWG, a KML, all those things that are GIS readable. We won't get into too many here. We'll show you the process of it, of adding them, or how you might go about adding more. But really, there are the two main ways. And I suppose the first way, bears kind of a little bit of context, right? Because if you're coming from a traditional desktop geographic information system, such as QGIS, such as ArcMap, such as MapInfo, these are desktop power horses, right? But they are ultimately desktop applications. So it was inherent, really, when you'd have these desktop apps, that you'd also have data available on your desktop to interact with, right? Not so much nowadays, where we have, a direct sign in, right? So like up the top right, I'm signed into my organization, and I can add data directly from my organization. In this case, it's an ArcGIS Online organization, but it could just as well be a portal, whether that's cloud-based, whether it's on a server. But the idea remains the same, that you have two main ways now of adding data to your pro projects, right? I mentioned before in the previous video, you just want to be careful of it because it does crop up every now and again in ArcGIS Pro. We have these kind of dual buttons here, right? So one is an icon, and it's going to get you to a place, right? The other option is to click on text, and you have more options, okay? Now, for the most part, though, when it comes to data, we're going to click on that icon here, and it's going to tell us, my content, folders, databases, all the stuff that you've connected to, right? So in the previous video, we set up a folder connection via catalog pane. That's there that I can add in. So that's offline data. So that's like a school CSV. That's a file geodatabase that contains a few data sets. Or I have options, right? So my portal is my ArcGIS Online account, or it's my actual portal, right? Depending if your organization is using Enterprise. But we can see here I have access to my content, my favorites, my groups, if I'm part of any share groups, my organization, if any data sets are shared throughout the organization and I want to bring them into Pro, I can. I also have access to ArcGIS Online, right? So this is every publicly available data set in ArcGIS Online. I have Living Atlas as well, right? So these are curated, authoritative data sets. Again, publicly available, but they are curated and they are, a trustworthy data source. And then you have options, of course, like you would in Windows File Explorer. You can add stuff from downloads. You can add stuff from documents. You can see here as well, if I go to Adam Corcoran, I have a OneDrive account set up as well, right? With all my kind of stuff for GIS Express set up. If I have any data sets there, I can bring it across as well. So let's show you how to add online data set from ArcGIS Living Atlas, but the process remains the same if it's part of your content, your organization. And then let's show you how to start adding offline data sets as well. What I like to do in Living Atlas, because it's such an expansive catalog, you know, you can see here as it starts to load up, it'll tell me, oh, like what's latest in Living Atlas. If you're, you know, primarily working in one country, then you can, you know, preface it. There's a little search icon up the top right. So if I type in Ireland, it's going to return to me every single data set that mentions the word Ireland in its title, in its metadata, whatever it is. And you can see here, this little globe icon means that it's part of Living Atlas. This little verified tick is authoritative, right? So it's recommended by an Esri distributor or authoritative organization in that region. And then the little other, you know, globe icon, I suppose one's an Atlas icon, Living Atlas. One's a globe icon, which indicates that it's publicly available. Right now, it's worth noting that you don't really get Living Atlas content that's not publicly available, right? So you expect to see these two kind of badges. But if I come in here and I want to see, like, you know, oh, population by sex and marital status, I can just click OK. That takes the data set from Living Atlas and places it in my map view within my ArcGIS Pro project. Now, if I press save up the top left, or I go Control S and save, keyboard shortcut for saving, the next time I open up this map, it's going to have the exact same data set that I had here as well. Yeah, so you can see here that it says who's married, who's not, what's the density of people who are married versus people who are not. And you can see quite a heavy enough data set. I would say, just as a rule of thumb, it is common sense. I suppose it is logical, but you will find your data sets coming from an offline data source, namely your C drive, or right, your local machine is going to load and display and perform a lot faster than online data sets. Yeah, it's just as a rule of thumb, just because online data sets, it's inherent you have an internet connection. Offline data sets, it's based on the machine itself. Yeah. But the idea here is my first data sets loaded in. I can click on a little tract of land that's going to give me a pop-up. Yeah. I can right click this here, and probably the most commonly used tool when we right click a layer, and we'll go through more as we go throughout this video course. But if I click on attribute table, it's going to give me all the records within this data set, right? So all the field names that are essentially columns in an Excel sheet, all the rows which correspond to relevant polygons or points or lines, yeah. And I can see information behind it, yeah. So the geographic part are the polygons, right? The geometries of where these things are in the world. And then the information part, you know, is each row and column within this attribute table. And then the system itself is, right, what you're seeing in front of you, ArcGIS Pro, yeah? So that's how to add stuff from online. And again, you can replicate that for adding your own content, your organization's content, your group's content, if you're part of any groups. The second way, then, you can make use of the catalog pane. And again, you know, you'll see you have portal there as well. You don't necessarily need to go in to add data. It's just, you know, the most commonly used way of doing things. But if I went in here and I said, oh, I want to see everything that's in ArcGIS Online, Living Atlas, you could do the exact same thing and drag and drop. Yeah. Two buttons reach the exact same workflow. Yeah. If I go back to project though, and you can see here, I made a folder connection in the previous video. If I go to that folder, I can see here I have a GDB. So file geodatabase, that is really the data currency of ArcGIS Pro. It used to be shape files. Before then it was KMLs. And before that, I don't know what it was, maybe like a, I don't know, table of some sort. But a file geodatabase is the kind of default data currency in ArcGIS Pro. And what I mean by that is any outputs that you do from analysis, you're typically saved as feature classes within a file geodatabase. Yeah. And we'll touch on file geodatabases and feature classes specifically in an upcoming video. But a file geodatabase, a handy way to know, it's a GIS readable folder for GIS datasets. and feature classes are those actual GIS data sets. So if I open up this geo database here, I can see I have an air codes data set, I have a road network data set, I have a schools final, I have special areas of conservation. And if I have a file geo database, I can left click, say road network, and I can just drag it onto my map. And straight away, and you can see like the performance is a bit night and day, right? This is coming from my C drive, a drag and drop, right? It's instantaneous. And I know it's not as large of a data set as what's coming from Living Atlas, but you know, it's worth bearing in mind. A polyline data set, in this case, representing road networks in a region in Ireland. And then special areas of conservation. If I do that again, left click, drag into my map, and I get options then. Yeah. The other way to add data, right? You know, if we're lucky, data starts off its life as a spatial data set. It's collected, it has geometry, it has geographic information in its attribute table. Everything's cool in the gang, right? But for a vast majority of organizations, you might be sitting on Excel sheets, you might be sitting on CSV files. And if you do have CSV files or Excel files, you can still geocode them, right? So, you know, the final way to add data to ArcGIS Pro is, of course, to geocode it, right? Existing data, right? We'll get into creating data, but existing data itself, if I highlight this school CSV, I'm just going to right click. I'm frozen, so I'll go back out. I'm going to right click, I'm going to open table, right? So best practice before you add anything to ArcGIS Pro, obviously, is to open up the table and see what's inside it. But you can see here, this is publicly available information coming from the Department of Education in Ireland. You can see here, it's locations of schools, addresses, you know, whether they're in an Irish-speaking area, what ethos they are, the number of female, male, total enrollments. But then on this side, I have X, Y. So anything where you have X, Y coordinates, doesn't matter what coordinate system, or latitude and longitude, I can bring that into Pro and I can geocode it. Okay. And so that's what we're looking for when we're seeing CSV files. We see latitude, longitude, that's the buzzwords, and we know we can geocode it within ArcGIS Pro. So how do we geocode it? We left click our CSV or our Excel sheet, drag it onto the map or drag it into the table of contents, doesn't really matter, whichever way we want. It's going to end up in a thing called standalone tables down the bottom. I'm going to right click school CSV, and I'm going to go up to this option here that says create points from table. We have different options here. We have make XY event layer. We have XY table of point. If I want a permanent feature class, which the vast majority of times I do, I want to say XY table to point. Now, you can see before artificial intelligence was even a thing in 2023, ArcGIS Pro was doing a little bit of it before it was cool. And what I mean by that is it's automatically going to tie in and say, oh, if you have an XY field, I'm going to plot them in this X field, Y field. Perfect, right? Or if you have latitude and longitude, I'm going to put them in to the corresponding fields, longitude being X, latitude being Y. The idea here is that it's picked up the coordinate system as well by default, right? So my input table is my CSV file. Output feature class is the actual data set it's going to go into. So I'm going to have a data set that has points of schools and then the entire CSV behind it. If I come in here, I can say, okay, well, I just want to call this like schools geocoded, yeah? X field, Y field, automatically it's picked it up. If you're doing anything with a 3D height, right, or anything like that, and you want to give it a Z field, you can, right? Z is equal to height. For this one, not necessary because I just want the geometries of the school. And then the coordinate system. If, you know, WGS 1984 covers the world, right? That's the same one the latitude and longitude is used for. But if you didn't have the correct coordinate system, you can come into this little globe icon here. And you can simply search. So if like your coordinate system is Irish transverse Mercator, for instance, which is one that's commonly used, I can just simply search Irish. It's going to be in projected coordinate systems, national grid, Europe. And there it is there, IRNet 95, Irish National Grid. A little bonus tip, if I right click one of these, I can add it to favorites. Okay, so get all your coordinate systems done up as you start to develop your pro projects, because then they appear in favorites easier than having to search, go into projected coordinates, national grid, Europe, stuff like that. Yeah, but I'm happy enough. I have not changed anything here except the title. But if I click OK, that is going to geocode my school's data set. Now, I did have another option. Here, if I right click this here, you can see here I have geocode table. Now that's if you want to make use of an ArcGIS World Geocoding service. It does use credits, that's why I'm not going to use it here. But it's essentially a best guess, right? If you don't have latitude, longitude, if you don't have coordinates, cool enough, you can geocode things. You know, I would say, obviously, if we are geocoding things, we have like a yes/no answer. If your coordinates are entered correctly in your CSV file, you're going to get 100% output. And it's very quick. Geocoding table, if you want to try, Esri offer a world geocoding service where you can put in address lines and it'll try and return geometries based on those address lines. But, you know, look, latitude, longitude, gold standard, or XY coordinates in whatever your chosen coordinate system is, that's your gold standard. You do have options, geocoding tables. They do use credits. Talk to your local Esri distributor about it, right? If you want to do it. But just to bring that up, yeah. Very worth noting, just to finish off this video, you'll notice that I have schools geocoded. So that's my actual final output. I can turn on and off these road network and the special areas of conservation. And they're my lovely points, right, of schools. If I click on a point, I get information about it. Yeah, the address lines, the enrollments, the X, Y. Worth noting, a common mistake when people start geocoding tables, whether they are geocoding using the World Esri Geocoding Service or they're using XY plot the coordinates on the map. A mistake commonly used is like, oh, well, my school CSV is still connected to it. No, it's not. It's not connected anyway. The CSV is now redundant, right? It is just the CSV file. It's not connected in any way to this one, right? So don't start thinking if I go in, update my CSV, I'm going to be able to see that reflected in real time in my geometries. It doesn't work that way. So there's no connection, right? We're just using a file to geocode something and then get an output at the end of it, yeah? But the output is not in any way connected now to the input. Yeah, so I can right click this and I can just hit remove. Save my project and I'll see you all in the next video.